So, the FNAF movie. I'm not gonna lie, this thing has been a pretty interesting situation for the past few years, because for the longest time, many people have doubted that this thing was ever gonna drop in the first place with the amount of delays and with how everything was just seemingly ever so quiet when it came to the overall production surrounding this thing. Yet, here we are in the year of 23 as Halloween slowly approaches with the film finally dropping, and well, there's plenty of good things which I have to say about it. So, how about we get into the video? Now, when it comes to the FNAF movie, I honestly feel like it's a bit of a mixed bag. Because as an adaptation, is it as something good as the Mario movie or Sonic movies? Well, yes and no in some capacity. But is it good as a standalone film, which is something which is another conversation of its own, which I will bring up within this video. But before I get into the negatives, how about I start about the positives? Now, when it comes to the positives of this film, I have to say, as an adaptation, I say it does a pretty good job on a surface level when it comes to some things. Because the animatronics look pretty great when it comes to how practical they are, and when it comes to the cinematography as well. Especially when it comes to making the pizzeria seem like a generally decent place. The music, while it really isn't anything special, does a pretty decent job of settling a certain vibe, which I kind of feel fits perfect for the FNAF series. And then most importantly, there's things like the story and the characters, in which I do have a few critiques about them. I do feel did a pretty good job for the most part. But now that I'm done talking about the positives, in which I guess I know that's a really short segment, I do feel like now's the part where I talk about some of my issues with the movie, which definitely could have been improved upon. Now, when it comes to the flaws of this film, I mainly feel like it's just centered around the plot and how some things are paced. Because, for example, I do feel like the general story is serviceable and that the characters are fine. I can't really say that the acting was necessarily bad. However, some subplots just kind of felt like they led to nowhere. Because, for example, one of the main subplots is that Mike, the main character, is constantly dealing with the trauma of his brother, which went missing years ago as he got kidnapped by Afton. It is constantly trying to recreate the events within his head to find out about who exactly did it. And here I was throughout the film thinking, oh, okay, the kids are obviously possessing these robots, so maybe Mike gets some type of closure through that by finding out that his brother was one of these machines, considering that whole angle. But then it just kind of goes nowhere because it's just like, oh yeah, the yellow rabbit had something to do with that. And the obvious clues were so obvious because who else in the movie wears the color yellow, and who else in the movie looks like they would unironically kidnap a child? Like, I know that FNAF is for kids, but I feel like you wouldn't need to be a genius to try and connect the dots right there. Not only that, but I also kind of find it strange how there's this whole Disney-esque subplot about this kid trying to get kidnapped, or not kidnapped, but taken legally because some other family members think that Mike isn't eligible as a parent. But then at the same time, this lady that's been trying to take this kid legally in court for like half of the movie just gets offed by Golden Freddy in the most just in your face way possible. And I'm just sitting there going like, wow, that kind of led to nothing. Not only that, but while I get that this film had to be different because while sitting in an office would just be boring for like 90% of the film, I also find it to be kind of crazy how there was only one scene where it genuinely felt like a FNAF movie, going off the general description, when it came to the animatronics just hunting down this one guy that was sitting in an office, which is kind of crazy because Mike is just like spending half of this movie sleeping in his office, not a care in the world about these guys, but he only really gets into danger towards the ending where he wakes up in a saw trap and the animatronics are the least of his issues then, and I just have to say it was kind of weird. But overall, I feel like the FNAF movie is pretty alright at best. Is it the best thing to ever come out? Well, that's debatable. But I do feel like as an adaptation, it does a pretty solid job for what it needs to do as a surface level take, and I do feel like the sequel could make some improvements when it comes to it eventually coming out. So, I'm Level360. I hope you all enjoyed the video. I'll catch y'all in another video soon, and later, folks. Have a happy Halloween.